We're back here, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP. 215-204-9449 is the number if you want to hop on board with us. We already knew that Bobby Cox, Tony La Russa, and Joe Torre were going into the Hall of Fame this summer in Cooperstown. Well, they'll be joined by 3 Hall of Fame players as well, as that was just announced this past week. And those 3 players are Greg Maddux, the Big Hurt, Frank Thomas, and my next guest, who won 305 games in the MLB, 2 Cy Young Awards, a World Series MVP, and he was, in fact, a 10-time All-Star, and that is the Hall of Famer, Tom Glavine. Tom, it's Zach Gelb here, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Congratulations, and how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great, and we appreciate you coming on. So every year I go down to the Super Bowl at Radio Row, and this year we'll be in New York, and we talk to a bunch of Hall of Famers or people that are awaiting their fate, and they talk about that day or the day that they're expecting of that call to come for the Hall of Fame. Take me through what was going through your head an hour before you got the call, and then once you finally got the call, what was going through your mind?
Well, it's a little bit of a difficult situation for me, the way my brain works, because, they kind of lay out what's going to happen if you get the phone call and how you're going to get the phone call, and then what happens after you get the phone call. And essentially, if you get the phone call, you're out of the house pretty quick and you're on your way to New York. So, that means you've got to do some preparation. And for me, that preparation is no easy task. I mean, we've got 5 kids at home and, carpooling in the morning and, doing all that stuff and finding babysitters and packing a little bit. You're doing all these things in preparation for something that you don't know if it's going to happen or not. And for me, number one, my brain doesn't work really well when I'm trying to prepare for something that's a little bit unknown. And then secondly, that whole baseball superstition thing where you're like, well, I don't want to do too much because I don't want to jinx myself. So, you kind of just do as much as you can to feel like you've accomplished something. And then, for us, we got the kids out of school, had everybody at the house at 12:30, and then we essentially just sat and looked at the phone and waited for that phone call. It's almost like you're, a kid in high school, and you call that girl that you really like to go out on a date, and you wait for her to call you back. You're just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And it got to be a little bit anxious, because they told me if I was getting in, I'd probably get a call between 12:30 and 1:30. So by the time it got to about 1:10, I started to get a little bit nervous. Was kind of hoping that, well, maybe there's a lot of guys getting in this year, so they're having to make a bunch of phone calls. I hoped I wasn't getting in, and then shortly after I got the phone call, and everything was pretty crazy after that.
Well, you deserved it, no doubt about it. You're a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I'm surprised you only got like 90% of the vote. And this day, in the age of the MLB Hall of Fame voting, you don't know who's going to get in the way these writers vote sometime. But this has to be extra special just because you get in with your manager. No matter when you get into the Hall of Fame, it's special, but you get in with your manager and Greg Maddux.
Well, I think that was the big thing for me as time drew near. You obviously have the anticipation of getting in, hoping you're going to get in, and obviously, being in the discussion is a big deal. Ultimately, getting in is a big deal. But I had the rare opportunity to take something that was already extra special and make it even more special. And that would be with the opportunity to win with Greg and Bobby. 2 guys that were such big influences on my career. I think that would have been the thing that would have hurt more than anything else. Had I not got in on the first go round, was that I would have missed out on that opportunity to win with those guys, celebrate it with those guys, and I'm sure to some extent pay tribute to those guys that day as well, because like I said, they were a big part of my career. And 2 guys who were very influential on my career, so I owe them a lot of thanks. So it'll be fun to go in with them.
And Smoltz will get in, and Bobby Cox and your pitching coach, Leo Mazzoni, they had a tremendous pitching staff over there in Atlanta, winning a World Series. Was winning that World Series the best memory of your playing career?
It is certainly from a playing standpoint. It's the 300th win obviously carries a ton of weight for what it meant and the accomplishment that it was. Probably, the only thing that came close to that, and probably in some ways exceeded that, was the World Series. I mean, that's what you played for. You set out every year to be world champions and be the last standing. And for us here in Atlanta, to have come close a couple of times and fallen short, and then ultimately have that opportunity again and be able to get over the hump and win a World Series with largely the same group of guys that had gone through the disappointment that was a lot of fun. I mean, there's no feeling quite like that. Like I said, that night that I won my 300th game, I mean, you talk about being proud and having just an unbelievable sense of accomplishment. The World Series certainly was along those lines. The difference being you get to celebrate it with everybody else that you're beating, and that's always a little bit more fun.
And you were tremendous in that World Series, being the MVP. And I also remember your 300th win, as it was at Wrigley Field up against the Chicago Cubs. But let me ask you this. You were a big hockey player growing up as well. What did you learn from the sport of hockey that helped you out on the MLB level?
Find the competitive nature of it. I mean, when you play hockey, you're in it. There's no room for being timid when you're out there on the ice. I mean, it's nonstop. It's fast. It's contact. You got to get after it. And I think people talk a lot about my stubbornness on the mound, my competitiveness on the mound. I think, quite honestly, a lot of that comes from hockey. I mean, that's the mindset of how you have to play the game of hockey. Certainly, there were some athletic things that probably carried over, hand-eye coordination and all of those things, processing information quickly because hockey is such a fast sport and making good decisions, things like that. But I think ultimately it boils down to, that competitiveness and that just drive to compete each and every shift that you're out there on the hockey rink. I think that's certainly carried over to my competitiveness with each and every pitch on the pitching mound.
We're talking MLB Hall of Famer, former New York Met and Atlanta Brave, Tom Glavine. And Tom, you got in the low ranks of the 90%, and that's still a tremendous accomplishment. I thought you were going to get even more, and I thought Greg Maddux was going to get every single vote. What do you say to the voters that left you off their ballot? Because I really don't understand it.
Well, I mean, I can understand it. Again, I guess a little bit in my case. I don't understand it in Greg's case. I don't know how, he didn't get 100% of the vote other than, it's just that tradition, so to speak, of, well, nobody's getting in with 100% of the vote. I mean, and I guess that's the case. I don't know logically, what excuse you can make for not voting for Greg Maddux. I think when it comes to me, I don't know. I mean, there are things, I guess, that people can look at and dissect about my game, and I didn't have the greatest stuff in the world, or I didn't throw 100 miles an hour or things of that nature. So I mean, I'm sure there were parts of my game that people were less than enamored with, but I can't argue. I mean, I didn't. You go from wondering if you're going to get in to wondering if it's going to be by the skin of your teeth to ended up with 90%, 90+% of the vote. So I can't complain too much about that. At the end of the day, I probably, had you asked me to bet if I got in, hey, you got in, where do you think your vote percentage is going to be? I probably would have said it was somewhere in the 80s, not in the 90s. So I'm pretty happy about it.
I thought the Hall of Fame process took a step back this year. Last year, no one gets in, and this year, there was a lot of side stories. Dan Le Batard giving his vote to Deadspin. One voter voted for not Greg Maddux, but Hideo Nomo, and then one voter also just put Jack Morris on his ballot and no one else, and said he wouldn't vote for anyone in the steroid era. I suggested last week that they should extend the ballots to 15 max per voter. They should give the Hall of Famers a vote and keep the writers their vote. What do you think about the Hall of Fame process and how they vote on it?
Well, I mean, I honestly haven't really paid attention to it other than the last couple of years, and certainly in the course of the last couple of years, you hear, more and more of these stories, and I think from the little that I did pay attention, I think that the one thing I've always had that problem with is the Greg Maddux scenario. I mean, so why can't anybody go in with 100% of the vote? I mean, if you deserve it, what's this? What sanctity are you protecting by not allowing anybody to ever get in with 100% of the vote? I mean, there are certainly some special cases, and if you look at Cal Ripken or you look at Greg Maddux, how those guys don't get 100% of the vote, I don't know. So there's always been that issue. The last couple of years, obviously, I think that whole sanctity of protecting the game has come under scrutiny even more. I think, quite honestly, some people think, well, who are these guys to be thinking that they're the keepers of the game? So, I think that discussion's only going to grow. I'll be 100% honest with you. I have no idea how to fix it or make it better, but I think clearly the door has been open, so to speak, in terms of the discussion, and I think it's only going to get more intense, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
A few more questions with Tom Glavine, as I know you got to run in a bit, and one thing that really agitates me are the assumptions that are made when people say, hey, this guy was on it, so everyone was on it, and that's why I'm not going to vote for a Mike Piazza or a Jeff Bagwell. I watched Mike Piazza and Jeff Bagwell play. Piazza's one of my favorite players of all time. You watch both of them play. How does Mike Piazza and Jeff Bagwell not get in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I mean, Again, I think that there is some of the some guys maybe got to wait it out a little bit more than others. I think in Jeff's case in particular, that's probably going to be the case. In Mike's case, look, I've said this and I stand by it. He's a Hall of Famer, and he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. I don't know where his numbers stack up in terms of Johnny Bench and Yogi Berra. I know they're right there. Yogi Berra had to wait a couple of years. Johnny Bench obviously was the guy that everybody looks to and compares to. But, Mike was the best hitting catcher of our era, no question about that. So I think he's a Hall of Famer from that regard, and he will get in. I just, I don't understand where, it seemed like last year Mike's vote was what it was, and then this year there seemed to be a little bit of scuttlebutt trying to link him and Biggio and Bagwell to some of the steroid stuff when previously there hadn't been any of that discussion. So I'm not sure where that stuff comes from. And to me, you better have some cold hard proof before you start going down that road if you're going to suspect everybody just because that's the era that it was and everybody's guilty until proven innocent. That's the part I don't like.
And it's unfortunate, all this steroid and PED talk, because it takes away from your moment, Greg Maddox's moment, and Frank Thomas's moment, because sometimes the players that don't get in are bigger than the players that do get in from the coverage from a media standpoint. But 60 Minutes, they ran a piece the other night about Alex Rodriguez and Tony Bosch. Did you get a chance to watch that?
I watched a little bit of it, but that's the kind of stuff that's hard for me to watch because, at the end of the day, I'm not going to defend Alex Rodriguez, but I'm not going to sit here and have any sympathy for the guy who supposedly was supplying him either. So, I mean, it's always hard for me to take those guys seriously because it seems to me that they're in a situation where they're trying to stay their own, more than anything else, and they should have been thinking about that in the first place.
And one thing that Bosch did say, and this will be the last one about the 60 Minutes piece, was he said, I could see why a player like Alex Rodriguez wanted to take these kinds of performance-enhancing drugs because he doesn't know who else is playing it. As a player that was clean like yourself, does it annoy you when that argument is made that, hey, this guy took it, so that means everyone else is taking it?
Yeah, I think it's a cop-out. It's 100% cop-out. Just saying, hey, I don't think I'm good enough with what I've got to compete, so I got to do something extra, I knew guys were doing it. So did Greg Maddox, and so did John Smoltz, and so many other guys who didn't take it. Our mindset was, we know they're taking it. There's nothing we can do about them taking it. All we can do is try and focus on our game and do the things that we can do to continue to get these guys out, regardless of what they're doing. So, I mean, I think that's a 100% cop-out on people's part when they say that. And essentially, like I said, you might as well just say, well, I'm not good enough with my God-given talent to compete, so I got to find something else.
On the way out here with the Hall of Famer Tom Glavine was just inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame. Will have his day later in the summer at Cooperstown, along with Bobby Cox, Tony La Russa, Joe Torre, Greg Maddox, and the Big Hurt Frank Thomas. I have to say a big thank you to you because not only are you a Hall of Famer on the field, you're a Hall of Famer off the field. Let me take you back to Mets Caravan. I don't know if you remember this back with your days in New York at WFAN. There was the whole big caravan event that you guys did, and one of my buddies was suffering through cancer, bone cancer, and it was yourself, Steve Traxel, Cliff Floyd, Woodward, and David Wright. You guys took an hour and a half to spend out of your day and talk with my friend, and that put a big smile on his face through a rigorous time that he was going through, and I can't thank you enough for what you did that day.
Look, it's my pleasure. I'm not surprised that those other guys were involved, too, because they're all good guys and quality people. But, look, I've said it. I like hearing that stuff as much as I like hearing, what I did on the baseball field and probably more because, like I tell people, baseball's what I did. It's not who I am, and it doesn't define me. So, I like hearing those stories, and trust me, those are the kinds of things that when my mom and dad hear them, that makes them proud, and that was every bit as important to me as anything else I did on the baseball field was making my family proud, and I feel like I did a pretty good job of that.
By the way, I was at the game when, after you won your 300, they honored you at Shea Stadium. They gave you some jet skis. Did you ever get to use those jet skis?
I use them a little bit. I've got them at a friend. We had a lake house at the time that we since sold because my wife wanted to go to the beach. So we really don't have a place to use them at the beach. But I've got them at a friend's house who has a place on a lake here in Georgia. So we get up there from time to time and ride them. They're still a blast. I still love them. Well,
Tom, we appreciate a few minutes today. Congratulations once again, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it.
Tom Glavine right there, MLB Hall of Famer, 305 wins, 2 Cy Young Awards,